Cybersecurity concerns are ever evolving. OT cybersecurity is even more complex, and it's so much more than just software and hardware. How do you stay on top of it all? Aaron Crow has over 25 years experience with cybersecurity. 15 of those years focused on operational technology across multiple industries, and he wants to help you. Welcome to the Protect OT Cybersecurity Podcast, brought to you by Industrial Defender. Now here's your host, Aaron Crow.
Hey, welcome to the show. Don, thank you so much for joining me today. Why don't you tell the audience who you are, what it is that you do, and just anything you want them to know about you.
Excellent. Aaron, thank you for having me on here. My name is Don C. Weber. I work for a company that I started about 5 years ago, Cutaway Security, basically focusing on doing security assessments, security research for people that are doing control environments, mainly in the electrical utility industry, but I've worked across multiple sectors: distribution, food and beverage, utilities, a little bit of gas and oil, but mainly in the electrical utilities. I started off doing this after I got out of the Marine Corps. I started doing information security. I went to school, got a degree, and so I've been an information security professional ever since. I've gone back and forth between doing defending and also doing offensive. So I've done incident response, led an incident response team, but now I'm pretty focused on doing that security test assessment, penetration testing within the control environments, providing those services. I am a certified SANS instructor. I teach the ICS 410 class, and I've been doing that for about the last 5 years, and just going around the world trying to promote the integration between the IT side, information security side, and the OT side, educating people from both fields in some of the basic concept from either side. So that's what I've been doing for the last couple of years.
Well, awesome. Well, we just happen to be recording this on November 9th, which is the eve of the Marine Corps birthday. So happy birthday, sir. Marine, a little bit early.
Thank you.
And also happy Veterans Day. I appreciate your service, sir.
I appreciate it, sir. Thank you.
Awesome. So let's dive in, man. What are some of the things? I mean, obviously you get to see a broad spectrum from both, teaching and seeing people that are coming into classes. Maybe they've never seen OT. They can spell OT. They don't know what it is, or they're really good in OT and they don't understand the IT side, and probably a mix of that, as well as on the assessment side of, probably all versions of maturity levels, from we don't have any idea what our environment is to we're pretty good, but we still need some help. Like, dig into some of those, maybe something that stands out with kind of your experience over the last 5 to 10 years with that.
Oh yeah, I know it's for me it all started off with that smart grid working group. I had no idea. I am one of those and I call myself a little bit dangerous. I'm one of those people. I'm one of those InfoSec people that had no idea about control environments. I had, I didn't understand what they were, even though I had dealt with them a little bit, off and on in different things. I had no idea that it was a completely different and new domain. It was just, to me, it was just technologies. Sure. And when I kind of got the call, I was doing some security management work, and then I went into doing incident response. I worked for IBM and doing going to organizations and pulling those system and network based artifacts, trying to find what people are doing. But the whole time I realized that even though I was finding people and I could see what was going on in the systems, I didn't really know how they were accomplishing those things. And I got lucky. I got integrated with some people that I met at DEF CON, and their company that they worked for, they were just getting into that smart grid working group. In other words, utilities didn't want the government to force things down their throat. In other words, they wanted to do some self-governing a little bit. They knew the regulation was going to come down, but they were trying to find out as much information they could around security and what threat actors were going to be doing, penetration testers, but also the people that were going to be coming in from the outside to attack their organizations. They wanted to understand that better and make good workflows. And so they asked this company to help them with that. That company did. They integrated and fed into the smart grid working groups. And eventually they started getting asked for people to do assessments. And that's when they realized that, hey, we need more people. And I lucked into it. But I lucked into it in a manner that the organization that had hired them, they were like, hey, nobody knows this, so we're gonna train you to learn this, so you can tell us what's really wrong about our architecture and about the things that we're selecting. So they're one of the organizations, the most mature organizations that I've seen that do vendor assessments. They actually pay for, if a vendor is going to be putting stuff in their area, they pay for that assessment of those products and those solutions, whether it's hardware, whether it's cloud-based solutions. And it's kind of paying for assessment for the vendor, but they're concerned about that. They're using that trust but verify kind of thing. But they can afford it because they've got a large organization and they understand the risk. They've done their risk assessment. They realize that the management of somebody else's solution and the implementation of those products plays a huge role in their risk governance program. So they're willing to pay for those assessments. And I lucked into that. I learned how to do hardware. I learned how to do security research by tearing things apart. That's what I've gone into it now. So why I'm saying that is I'm coming back around. It's this is the way that a lot of information security professionals are coming at this field. That was 10 years ago, and we did a lot of things 10 years ago, and then everything kind of went quiet. We did a lot of that initial research. We saw some headway in what 62443 is calling countermeasures, I like to, because I'm from the InfoSec side, I call them compensating controls. But these applications, these solutions, these ways to deploy things in architecture, we got a lot of improvement in things were going forward, but the industry, the people that were outside of the OT side, there was no news. There was no news for them. Now that ransomware got into it, now that there are some very public things recently, Stuxnet was just the start of it. They're like, oh yeah, you can attack things. Well, a Colonial Pipeline and some of the other more recent malwares have really kind of opened the floodgates themselves. We thought the floodgates were open before. We had no idea. So now we're getting this. Now people are seeing these things. We're getting more security researchers that are looking at that. We're getting these people that are like, oh, this is a new field. This is a new domain. I need to be educated in that. And also, so that's from the IT side, the what I call the enterprise side, the corporate side. So you get your information security professionals, you get your IT admins that are going to either look towards assisting in this manner, or they are being told that, hey, we need your help over in this area, so they're being moved over there. And so it's new, and that's what's exciting about that. ICS 410 is I get that influx of people, and I can talk to them about everything that I just said, which is like, hey, here's this education. There's going to be a lot to learn. You're going to have to be patient. You're going to have to understand that your way of thinking of things is good. It's great that you understand that, but you're going to have to change your approach and change your normal processes. But I also get, and when I say that the classes is usually 50, it's averaged out about 50-50, 50-50 IT and InfoSec and 50-50 OT side. Because the OT side needs to have that education of how are information security professionals talking? Why are they asking me to do certain things? What are these terms that they're using? We don't use these terms. Same with the IT admins. They're these people are coming in. Why are they asking me to do things? Why are they asking me to patch? Why are they saying these things when we can't do these things? Well, so I get to say, like, okay, here's the terms we're going to be using. This is why we use those terms. But this is also why we need to educate them to the terms we're using in these fields, and hopefully, and I think that I do a pretty good job. The OT people that come to the class, they actually have a better understanding of what those concepts and those terms and the thought processes, and they can have a better conversation. The whole goal of ICS 410 is to establish a baseline for communications between both sides, because that's really what we need. So that's it's been pretty exciting doing that, and I only have a few people that come out of there, dissatisfied with the level of information, but it's usually because to them it's too basic.
Sure.
But we need that. That's the class. That's why we have some of the other classes that are involved. But the 410 class, you have to define how we're going to speak about things so we can have a conversation.
Yeah, and that is such an important factor, right? Is because I have an IT background, I have an OT background, I've been in both worlds, and those two, they use a different language, right? They're speaking English, but they don't speak to each other. The words that I use on this side is different than that side, and it means different things. It's impact. Doing tabletops with ICS Village. I'm wearing the shirt today. Doing tabletops at conferences, and we bring in a lot of IT people, and we go through these tabletop exercises where we're just talking about a hypothetical, OT incident at an airport, right? And it's so funny not funny, but interesting to see how the IT side of the house, how they process it, and we need to make that an incident, and we need to jump on this. And I'm like, time out. When you call something an incident at an OT site, that's a different. That means something very specific. That critical infrastructure. I've got police, and there's a lot of things that triggers. So I'm not that I'm gonna avoid, or I'm not gonna not call it an incident. I'm not saying that you shouldn't call it those things. My point is that everything from patching to mitigation, like when an analyst sees an alert that shows up, they're not going to kick a device off the network in OT, because that could cause issues. That could cause safety issues. That could cause life, and there's all sorts of implications to that. Usually their response in their playbook, when you look through it, an OT response is usually pick up the phone and call the person. Hey, what's going on down there? Right. That is their response. It's not sending malware. It's not kicking it off the network. It's not going into your NAC and, isolating it, putting it on a separate VLAN, like none of those things. Like, it's pick up the phone, old school, and say, hey, Bob, what do you got going on at your plant? Because I'm seeing these things. Is this you or not? Because if it's not, then we need to figure out something to do. If it is you, okay, I'll just ignore it.
Right, and they also have to be educated to expect that phone call,
right,
and to understand why that phone call is being made, and what it actually means to them, and what they can ask for. And ultimately, because we do cover that in the class, we do. The capstone is actually kind of a tabletop session. We've modified it recently in the last couple of months, but it's still the same thing. It's a tabletop session where you're going through and you've got 8 different injects, and you're talking about how you would handle things. It starts on the IT side because actual attacks within the control networks are 2-stage attacks. So we start on the enterprise side, and we slowly work into the OT side. And actually, just the last couple of injects are from the OT side. But you quickly realize that hey, people might not understand why you're asking for things, and what needs to be accomplished. And I like to tell them, I'm like, hey, you realize that you're the IT infosec team, you're not in charge of this area. As an incident commander within on the even on the corporate side, and I haven't done anything on the OT side. I've been in the enterprise, but I know several people that manage these things. We quickly realize, and we have to educate people that, I say incident commander, but I'm not in charge of the incident. As the information security professional, I am the subject matter expert for technical recommendations around incident response. It's the actual process owner who's the incident commander, who's in charge of the incident, who makes the calls. We feed that person information, and they do things like, do we need to island? Or do we need to go to manual? Can we live with this server? How long can we operate without this server? Are they in the safety? Are they on safety devices? And is that concern? And the actions, what has to be from the IT and the information security side, they need to be educated around the fact that, yeah, just like you said, you don't take things offline to contain them. You know, your containment might be monitoring the network and seeing what they're doing, accepting the fact that they're in there, and then taking some actions to isolate if possible, but only at the direction of the people that understand the process and the safety around that. It's a complete incident response is a completely different animal. We broached that in that 410 class to kind of establish that baseline, and then SANS has that, of course, and there's other people out there. I'm not trying to expand upon SANS, but there is the 515 class that kind of gets a deeper dive into information gathering and the effects of making recommendations, how difficult it is to get to artifacts and get the answers, especially if you don't have some type of solution that's providing you that detail. You have to go out and manually get so much stuff. And how do you do that? You have to start talking at it first. You have to start thinking about how you're going to collect things, and all of that takes practice, whether it's through some type of a PowerShell script or a batch script or some tool from Mandiant. You were describing to me when we were up in a GridSec at GridSecCon, you were describing to me some of your information gathering tools, which I think would be extremely valuable as well. So I can't wait to get a hold of that and play with that a little bit. But it's so different, but we need to talk about it. Just sit down. I always tell people, hey, don't go technical, don't go confusing. Just get the key stakeholders at the table, like you were doing, and just say, all right, who's in charge? And that's probably going to start an argument. But that's a good argument, and it's better to have it at that non-stressful event than to be concerned about safety and people's lives. It's better you don't want that stress then.
Yeah, and we do this in OT all the time, and in IT obviously. We have fire practice tests, right? So we go through these events, and hey, we're going to have a fire alarm today, and these are our muster points. Let's make sure everybody knows what to do. Same thing on the operational OT side. Hey, we're going to go through this exercise. It's a safety evac. These are your muster points. This is what you do. Here's who's in charge. They have a red hard hat. You look for the fire department, all of that type of stuff. We do all these things all the time. We know, an operator knows when his screen's smurf and he can't control the unit anymore, even if it's running fine, whatever it is, they know to punch it out. They know what those scenarios are. If these things happen, then do these actions. But what I see, and I see it better in the last 5 years, but what I've seen over my career is most of the time there's a demarcation, and then there's a gray area. IT comes up so far, OT comes up so far, and there's this big gray middle area that nobody wants to own. And it's okay, what do we do in those scenarios? And there is no plan around them, because usually what happens is the OT people go up, these are the things I own, and I can build policies and procedures and train my people on. The IT side does the same thing, and they're not bridging that conversation, bringing everybody to the table to say, okay, what about all the other stuff in the middle, and how do we deal with that? And that's because it's hard, because it's a different language, because as soon as you say it, you're going to get fights, and people are going to throw, soda or whatever, and they're going to get pissed off, because it happens. But it needs to happen when there's not an incident going on, and not waiting until you want to be left of bang, not right of bang, right?
Yeah, and it's everybody's getting a real crash course. We're talking about one of the important things that's involved in all of this, and this is certainly the response and the recovery. Everything that builds up to that. We're just. Right now we're piling it on to the OT people. We're architecture updates, vulnerability management, asset inventory, and incident response. Oh my gosh, it's such a busy time for those people. And they're doing their day-to-day jobs. It's not like they've hired any additional people, and that's probably the biggest problem in the industry right now, is that we are asking the people to do all of these extra things, and we're not getting them help. We're just piling on these extra responsibilities. Oh, by the way, you have to be concerned about security. Great, but how, who, what, and that. And that's why we do need to get those information security professionals, the IT admins in to help with these things. The OT side has been so self-sufficient for so long. Some of the smartest people I know are, have worked on the OT side. They're chemical engineers and electrical engineers. They are, excellent network administrators and okay Windows administrators. They're not as good as they think they are at the administration of these things. But that's not their job. Their job is to keep the processes running. Their job is to make sure that the applications are configured correctly, to do their jobs appropriately, to ensure they operate at the right moments. But they need help. They need help from the IT side. I mean, even before you get an information security professional in there, you should get an IT admin in there, both for Windows administration, for application administration, and for the network. That those people have been trained around information security. They know the requirements. They just don't know they know the requirements for security on the IT side. They just need to be informed of the requirements on the OT side. And that's all it boils down to, is getting the requirements to those people and ensuring that you're monitoring them correctly so that they're making good decisions for the availability and resilience of the OT side. And once they get it, they're going to be off to the races. But we have to accept those people in. We have to start training them, because if we keep them out, how are we advancing at all? We're just piling on these extra duties on these other people, these other educations. And what are they going to do? They're going to default to the process. They're going to prioritize their efforts around that, which means that everything else is going to be deprioritized. They'll accept that. All right, you want me to do that? Fine. I'll think about it. I'll consider it as I'm going forward. But are they really going to implement it? Not unless you force them to, not unless you follow up. And then if you're doing that, then all of their other duties are slipping as well. So we need to get them help. We need to get them people, because it's we're asking people to do a lot these days.
Yeah, and I've seen that firsthand at so many organizations, big and small. So it's not just the small guys, right? And I was fortunate and lucky enough to help build a team as an asset owner, and I was able to build. And again, this was before there were OT people. Like, nobody had that title. That was really before that term existed. So there were no OT people to choose. So we brought in these IT technology people. And then eventually I was able to also bring in some OT people from the plants, right? So operators and control system engineers and that kind of thing. So I had this mesh of really strong network engineers and Active Directory guys and VMware folks and application layer folks and, really strong cybersecurity capabilities, and also these really strong control system engineers that design control system, did control system upgrades at plants and worked in plants for 30, 40 years doing this stuff, right? So when my IT guy would say something that was really smart from a technology perspective, but really stupid implementation in OT, we could have those conversations before we went out and did it, right? So we had the right people at the table in a very small team, and we were able to have these dialogues in these rooms before we went out and tried to push it at a plant and caused a problem. Like, we broke something, because what happens? You break something in a power plant or in a facility, you're out the door. They're never going to let you back in again. Like, whatever technology you were going to bring, they're not going to allow in. It's out. You're done. Like, good luck. Only way it's going to happen is if new regime comes in and it's forced down from the top, but they're going to do it kicking and screaming. So having scenarios like that, and I know I was fortunate because I've been to a lot of organizations bigger than the one I was at that did not have a team like that, right? They had these OT people that were good at what they did, but again, they weren't network admins. They weren't, Active Directory experts. I supported 100,000 user Active Directory environments for very large Fortune 100 companies. They had a little bitty forest that they deployed for a control system, right? There's no way they can have the understanding. And the problem with that is they think they know it, and they do. And then they do something, they implement it, and they don't know what they did and why it broke or why it didn't work the way it expected to. And the same thing on the IT side. They come with all this knowledge from networking and firewalls, and Active Directory is another great example. And hey, we should deploy these group policies, and everybody should have their workstation lock and come up with a screensaver except when that's in the control room where they need those screens available on the screens all the time. And having a screensaver come up is a problem. And you can't expect everybody to log in and log out every 5 minutes, because they need it's more important to be available than it is to have security around logging into the station, because there's other controls. Like, I have to badge in. There's a gate. I have to get into the facility. And then I have to have the right PPE, and I have to know where the control room is. And then I have to badge again in the control room. And there's 10 people that have access to the control room. So if you're not one of them and you just happen to wander in, they're going to know you're out of place. And if you sit down at the control room, they're going to tackle you.
Yeah, I always found it, it's there's always something new and interesting about the OT side, and how every sector is slightly different. And we talk about the process owners and the people that they have helping them with the Active Directory and networking and stuff like that. But it always amazed me of going into really that you would think are well-established organizations, and when you look at their enterprise side, very secure and huge teams and stuff like that. Then you look at their OT side, and they're trusting the vendor, they're trusting the integrators. Those integrators and vendors are deploying those full solutions, because that organization has nobody that understands the implementation of all of that. What the problem is that they're trusting them. Are like, hey, we hired you to deploy a secure solution. They're like, okay, we'll secure it. But without any specific requirements, what is that security update? What is that secure solution? Now, some vendors, like the large vendors, are getting better at how they're training their implementers. The teams that are going out and doing the integration, and so that training is getting out there. But the third-party integrators, the ones that do actually most of the deployment of these environments, what are they doing? If those teams aren't doing that, if they don't have a program to educate those implementers, then they're deploying things and they're like, okay, it's secure. I changed the password. It's secure. Everything's running as domain admin because that's what makes it work, because that's what our documentation we've had for the last 10 years have told us to do. Yeah. When I got hired, was given this documentation. It said, install it as domain admin because it works. And that's still happening. There's, and I know I'm being a little flippant. That's not the case for every single integrator. Sure. But certainly those smaller companies are well behind even the vendors in these space educating their teams. So hopefully we'll get some improvement in that area as we're going through, but it's up to the owners and operators to make those requirements and to validate. You got to come back and you got to, actually 62443, I think they're going to start, saying that the CSAT and the CFAT and the CSAT, the cybersecurity factor acceptance testing and site acceptance testing, which happens after the functional requirements are tested. Then there's you have to do this the cybersecurity checks after that, and people need to start implementing that. They need to do the functional tests, make sure everything's working, and then also follow up with those cybersecurity stuff. Hopefully the integrators will start moving in that direction, but it's going to take educating those people, whether they're brand new kids, kids that are, getting hired to do this, or they're people that experience admins and developers and that are coming from the IT side. They just need to be educated into the requirements.
Well, and so that's very, very true. So I implemented that exact same thing. So we did factor acceptance testing on control system upgrades, and I implemented all of my security stuff. So when we checked out the control system, we were also checking out all the cyber stuff too. So we wanted everybody to be on the same page because there was so much hesitation. And the other piece to that is also to pull on that string of these standards. You're right. A lot of these control vendors are getting a lot better. Their cyber offerings are way better. The problem I see, and it's a limitation, is, you go to Microsoft and you're implementing, or you go to AWS, and they have a template that says this is best practices for deploying cloud environment for systems. But they don't have a clue of what software you're going to do, what your users are looking like what integrations you need. There's no way. So it's very generic, and then you're supposed to build upon those things. That's what's missing in the OT side, is nobody has the understanding of, okay, yes, I see that this, you need to have antivirus, you need to have secure remote access, you need to have secure file transfer, and you need to have a firewall up here, and you need to segment your things, and you need to, all these basic blocking and tackling things. But what happens when you start saying, okay, but I don't have control system A for my entire thing. I have balance of plan as one vendor, and turbo control A is another vendor, and turbo control B is another vendor, and I've got this third party controls down here, and I've got a common unit that's over here, and I've got all these things. No vendor owns it all. So you can't, who do you go to? Again, it goes back to there's a whole bunch of gray area, and nobody owns that. And unless they have somebody like the team that I built and what I did in my previous world, I was able to stitch all those things together and really own it and say, no, vendor A, we're not going to do that. We're going to do this. You're going to stand up in my VM environment, and I'm going to own the firewalls, and I'll give you an interface off of it, and I'll put whatever rules you want on it, but I'm controlling it. And I'm going to build the Active Directory, and you can put whatever group policies you want on it, but I'm owning it, right? And because it takes that level of understanding, because all these things are integrated. Like Active Directory can shut down your system. Like it is one of the most probably underrated things that's in a control system is Active Directory, because it controls access to everything in most cases. And it's a single forest, and there's nobody on site that understands Active Directory other than how to create a user account and how to disable a user account, like basic understanding. But it's so powerful and so dangerous if you do the right thing. And that goes with firewalls and networking and VMware and you name it. There's nobody that can stitch all those things together. And when they're designing these control systems, yes, they design maybe the Emerson control system and then the Foxborough control system. They design those things with those security, but they're not designing a full system. This site has all of these things in it. We need to secure all of it together. I don't need 6 antivirus solutions. I don't need 12 different backup solutions. I don't need 15 different SIM solutions at a power plant or a manufacturing facility. I need to have one. And you guys need to work with this one. Like, I know it's not your preferred, but that's what we have. And I'm not going to have 12 of them because I have a hard enough time supporting one. How do you expect me to support 12?
I mean, it's that's what is exciting about this domain is the just the abundance of challenges, abundance of things that need to be accomplished. Everything you're describing there is a modification to the culture of compliance, and what I've always been impressed about is the culture of compliance in control environments, and it's all born out of safety. So you shouldn't be surprised. Now they're starting to realize the role that cybersecurity plays into those safety aspects. But at the same time, they don't want to over-engineer things because they know that over-engineering is just cost overhead, and that plays into security as well. If you're looking in one direction, something else is happening somewhere else. So it all needs to be planned out. We need to give people some good basic requirements, but at the same time we need somebody that's championing that in different organizations and making decisions about how it's going to move forward. And that's what people as long as the person that's doing that is respected within the organization, that they've been given that leadership is told everybody, hey, this person is championing this effort, work with them, their goal is to make everything resilient and available and reliable and safe. That's extremely important. That's what they're hoping to hear, because ultimately they and I jokingly say this in the classroom, but it's kind of true. Really what they want everything working so that they can go home, they can go fishing, they can go barbecue on the weekends and in the evenings. That's their ultimate goal. To ensure everything is running so they don't have to be there, because that's what it's designed to do. And cybersecurity is a part of that now, and they realize it, but do it right. Don't over-engineer it, and don't ask them to do too many things, but tell them exactly what to do. That's what they're hoping for. So,
yeah, and it's so simple, right? We're not talking about complex. You don't have to over-engineer these things. Like, just include the right people in the design in the beginning, right? Start thinking about it as a whole system, my whole environment, and make sure that you're asking the right questions, right? One of the things I always taught my team, and I just beat it into their head. It was, ask good questions, like have a questioning attitude. When a vendor tells you something, don't just take it for granted. And that's, I think, some of the way we've gotten up till now sloppy in the OT space on the cyber side is because for years, we just looked to the vendor and we trusted them. You talked about that earlier, right? Is we put all of our faith in the vendor and we just expected they were the subject matter expert. And they are in the control process. They're just as new to the OT cyber stuff as the rest of us are, right? So they're not experts in those fields. So they brought in outside talent, et cetera. But you still need to ask questions. Just because the vendor says it doesn't mean you should just trust. You should, you said it earlier, trust but verify. Like, why is it that way? Why do I have to do this? Why do I have to do that? Like, well, if you don't do that, then we can't support it. Okay, well, I don't care if you support my firewall because I'll support the firewall. That's the only reason? Okay, well, then I'll still put in mine, and I don't expect you. I'll sign right here. I'm not expecting vendor A to support firewall. We good now? Okay, now let's move forward.
Well, I mean, it's so many people are, and they look at vendors. They look in vendors in these areas, and they're like, why can't GE or Rockwell or Honeywell or, why can't they just fix themselves?
Right.
Well, first of all, they are trying, but if you look at the size of those organizations that I just named and you think about all of the different business units that they have around the world, each one with a separate responsibility, you're actually talking about implementing the change you just described in those individual business units. Like the overall organization is saying, hey, we're going to start operating like this. But you have to make the change in every one of those businesses because it's a difference. It might be a whole different society, meaning that, like as an example, and I'll probably get some of these wrongs. GE has medical in Mexico and digital in Canada and electrical in the US and something else in Germany. And every one of those teams, they're actually businesses themselves, and they're designed to kind of slightly compete with each other, and so they don't share a lot. They're too big to share, information and processes and people. Even if they've been directed to, it's a little. I mean, it's challenging to have those relationships, and so we kind of have to we have to understand that we don't have to accept it. We have to understand that it's going to be a challenge to change those cultures with. For organizations that size, but that means that we got to rely on ourselves. We have to give clear requirements, have clear expectations of those. Now, smaller companies are starting to do this, and I think it's in inductive automation does the Ignition historian, right? If I'm correct, I might have that wrong, but Ignition, everybone's looking to Ignition because of some of the capabilities that they provide from a data historian perspective. But when I went in, and this is a couple years ago, I went in to do an assessment, and the admin pulled out a PDF that he'd printed out, and it was a hardening checklist. They had realized that they needed to provide this information, this implementation guidance to the administrators for the deployment of their systems. They made that hardening guide downloadable, and the admin just went through it, check. He had notes written in there. I can't implement this because of A, B, C, and D. And I was like, great. I didn't ding him on any of it. I made some recommendations, but that's the type of thing that we're hoping to see, and we're starting to see that a little bit more, but when you think about these technologies, how complex they are and how they have to be configured just so in a lot of different environments, the vendors can't predict how you're going to use this equipment and what your requirements are. They can only build things to fit a lot of different scenarios, and then on the ground implement some of those specific requirements. But they can provide some of that hardening guidelines. They can provide some of those that information around what network services are necessary, what ports are necessary in different situations, and hopefully even updating some of their installation scripts instead of going with some of default open settings like we used to do in the business world 20 years ago. But over 10 years ago, we realized we can't do that anymore. In other words, start secure and have them roll back some of those settings to increase the attack surface associated with necessary communications. That's what we need, right? We need more secure products implemented, but that boils down to once again, the owners and operators talking about those requirements, putting those requirements in, whether it's a greenfield like you're talking about from the start, or whether it's at new service contract, new service level agreements where you're renewing stuff. the vendors are expecting owners and operators to add those things to it, and maybe it's some cost increase and that needs to be expected. But at the same time, it shouldn't be too much because they're building that into their process already anyways. And so my expectation is that we're going to see improvement around that. But and hopefully it doesn't increase the cost too much.
Yeah, and it really comes down to as you were talking through that, I remember I've been in this game long enough that I remember very specifically when we were doing control system upgrades, and there was an option on the table, and it was, do I want a secure solution or an unsecure solution? And that was the actual language in the vendor's contract. But at the end of the day,
I've heard that.
Back in that time, it was uncommon. Honestly, it was uncommon to have a secure one, have Active Directory and all these other things. You didn't do that, but you hadn't needed to up until that point. All control systems were insecure. They had local accounts, or they didn't have any accounts at all. Like the vendor came in, logged in, and nobody ever logged out. It just, when it rebooted, it automatically logged in. Like there was never any security built in. So
well, nobody,
it was such an odd concept, and
well, nobody realized. I mean, everybody. I mean, this is all born out of that physical security, and certainly that's still a huge part that needs a lot of looking at. One of the things I call out is you need to take a look at your physical security because it degrades over time. But at the same time, there's always that expectation. Hey, we keep people physically away from this. They can't get in and do the things that you're talking about. Right. But as soon as we attached Ethernet networks, what people didn't realize, they didn't understand they were getting the information they needed, and it was great. And they're like, oh my gosh, I've got so much more control and view, and I'm safer. I've got this standoff. This is beautiful. I freaking love this. But they didn't realize what they were inviting in. They didn't understand the level of risk. They didn't understand how people were going to start gaining access to those resources. Yes, if you don't have a domain name for something and you put something on the internet with just an IP address, yes, people are going to find it. It doesn't, but they don't do that on a day-to-day basis. They don't realize that people like us are scanning the internet looking for new stuff. They just don't realize it seems stupid, but when we think about it, we're like, it seems logical. Yep. So and it boils back to, that's not their job to think like that. Right? I don't want them thinking like that. I want them thinking about the process. I want them to have people that can ask those questions and understand the ramifications of the choices that have been made to facilitate some of that improvement of monitoring and control.
And take the lessons learned from the IT side, because we have been, we're 10 to 20 years ahead of the OT side in the processes and the things that we've done on the IT side. That doesn't mean you can take an IT process and cram it into OT and expect it to work, but there are definitely lessons you can learn from that, right? So a lot of the things that we've done, Active Directory, does that mean you take group policies from IT and roll them into OT? No, it would break everything. But there are some nuggets. What of those things can you do? Or maybe I modified a little bit. Which one of those things makes sense in the OT world versus the IT? I remember the very first high-speed internet cable modem I got back in the day. I plugged in, and I was so excited. I pulled up my computer, and I went to, I don't remember, look at the network layer that was there, and it was a shared network. And every other person in my area that had cable modem was on the same IP subnet as me. So I could see them. There was no firewall. There was no routing setting. So I could see their printer shared, and I could see their desktop, and I could open their shares on their machine. And I was just like, so a friend of mine lived next door and had a printer shared. And so I just printed something to his printer, and it said, I see you, or something like that. Of course, I went over and knocked on his door, and I was like, hey, man, I printed something. I don't know what's going on. You have any He's like, that showed up at my house. So it was funny. But the point is we've come a long ways. Like, you plug in your cable modem router now, and you've got firewalls, and you're segmented off your networks. And you would never, even on Wi-Fi, you're air gapped in between, not allowing peers to talk to each other. We've come a long ways. We've got to continue to grow in the OT space and be open to look at it and do it differently, because I tell you, I get so tired of hearing we've done it this way for 40 years. I've never had a problem. I've ran this power plant for 50. My dad worked in power for 40 something years. And all of this stuff is just like over his head, and he's a super smart guy, but this is just not in his wheelhouse.
And Admiral Grace Hopper, she said that that's the most dangerous statement in the world. We've always done it like this, it's I think about that, especially when people say that out loud. I just think about her saying that and how wise it was even back in the day, and it applies. It applies going forward with all of this stuff. But I think we're moving into a good direction. I don't think that anybody, and all of the people that I've met, that are controlling these environments, they're about safety, right? And they're about they understand technologies, add other certain things to their capabilities, but they also come with everything comes with a cost, and it all boils down to helping them understand those costs, and helping them understand kind of coming up with the minimum requirements to ensure that everything operates, because that's kind of what we do. We want to keep things slim, so that things operate smoothly and consistently. We don't want to over-engineer things, and we need to be kind of flexible around some of our recommendations and our approaches. But I think that that's doable, but it requires attention. It requires attention to detail, and it requires that we have people that understand those domains to do those things. Because if not, either nothing's going to get done, or too much is going to get done. It's going to be overly expensive, and it's just going to be unmanageable.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I've seen so much great change in the years, which leads me to my wrap up question here is over the next 5 to 10 years, what are the maybe one thing that you see that you're excited about coming up over the horizon, and maybe something that maybe is a little concerning you see that could be coming up over the horizon if we don't do something about?
Oh, I mean, it's both the same thing. It's cloud. Yeah. It's cloud. Cloud. If you're not preparing for cloud, if you're not asking those questions, it's you are working in the dark ages right now. Because and when I started this 5 years ago, I was an advocate. I was like, keep cloud out of your stuff, right? Have make sure you have a policy, no cloud services. And that's it's impossible to do. The vendors are going to be rolling out things. The integrators are going to be recommending things. People are going to be making these solutions. If you aren't prepared to answer the questions around it, if you're not prepared to ask the right questions, there's going to be so much cost and so much additional risk that you're not prepared for. And does the OT side understand anything about cloud? No, that's not their job. Whose job is it? It's the job. Right now, every company has an IT admin or an IT team, a full team for managing cloud within the corporate environment. If you don't allow some leadership people from those teams in and start building out your cloud team, you're going to quickly fall behind the times. You're going to be deploying solutions that are vulnerable to remote attacks, not against your company, against those cloud services. Right. Okay, and we're seeing that happen. Heck, just the Okta stuff is just amazing to read through and understand the impact of a service that's managed by somebody else, and how that impact affected the actual operations of different organizations across different sectors, both IT and OT. And so it's if you're not prepared for that, if you're not prepared to bring those people, those IT professionals in, train them about OT. If you're not doing that, you're falling behind the times. And guess what? Somebody's going to start doing this better than you, and they're going to start making more money more quickly, and people are going to move to them. So start planning.
Yeah, and like you said, right, most attacks are, I mean, you look at Target, look at all these others, right? They weren't attacking Target. They got through a subcontractor and got in the back door, right? Same thing here. Maybe you're not putting your control system in the cloud, but there are cloud services, and you have to be aware of which ones are you depending on, because if Okta shuts down and then I can't get secure remote access, and then I can't do this and I can't do that, then at some point one of these dependents services are going to impact my operation side, right? Eventually, right? So understanding all these things and making sure you have operational people in with the cloud people, in with the network security people, in with the firewall people. Like we need to have this. I hate the term, but it's true. We need to have this convergence. We need to stop thinking about it as we're on different teams, right? We're offense and defense. We're on the same team. Like we're protecting different things, but we're still on the same team, and we need to share. It's like, Army, Navy. Yes, we're one's green, one's blue, but we're still all Americans. Like that's the umbrella we need to be under. And remember, we're still fighting for the same goal. Yes, you go by land and I go by sea, but okay, we're still trying to get to the same point and solve the same solutions. And ultimately, I agree with you. That's one of the things I see that I'm excited about, but I'm also anxious about, because on the flip side is it going to take some bad incident before light bulbs go off, where they're willing to spend more time and effort in that environment doing those things.
I agree.
So what do you got going on today? Like I said, today's November 9th. What do you got going on the rest of the year? What do you got coming up? What do you want people to know about you? How do they find you, get a hold of you, all that good stuff?
Well, right now I'm doing a mad dash. We're trying to get a new SANS class in the books, ready for what we call alpha testing, which is some selective testing of the class with instructors and other people that we know and trust. It's ICS 613, security assessments and penetration testing of ICS and OT environments. And I'm responsible for the first 2 days, which is understanding what security assessments are, planning and scoping them. And so I'm doing a mad dash to make sure that I deliver what I can by Monday. So I'll be working over the weekend with some of that. The other things that I'm doing, just doing teaches, a little bit of year-end stuff. I got a couple teaches that I'm doing for the ICS 410 class, and then hopefully I've got a new assessment that I'm going out to an organization to do a little bit of threat hunting, which is kind of near and dear to my heart. I'm really good at offense and security assessments, but I like to defend. So hopefully I can get out and do some threat hunting and help people improve their environments a little bit. And then the next year is just a matter of getting out, staying public, doing some of these teaches, doing some security assessments, trying to break out of the utility industry a little bit. I've got great clients in there. I'm really pleased with the improvements that we've been able to have at those organizations, but at the same time, there's so many different sectors out there. When you work in a control environment that is very regulated, you miss some of those experiences, some of those challenges of those smaller organizations where they are directly connected to the internet, stuff like that. I'm hoping to see some of those so that I can help reduce some of those instances. That's my goal for next year, but we'll see how it goes.
That's awesome. Well, I look forward to seeing you again on the next conference that we happen to cross trails at. I'm sure there'll be plenty coming up, and maybe even at ICS Village event or whatever. Like there's always something going on. One of the things that seems to be a motto and a theme on a lot of the guests that I bring on is that, yes, I've got a day job, I do this thing, but on the flip side, I'm also trying to train people and bring people up to speed and help, because we need more resources. We need more people that are in this space fighting the good fight. Because again, at the end of the day, we're all on the same team and we're all trying to fight for the same goal. I want my lights to turn on when I flip the switch. Like at the end of the day, we all do.
Oh yeah, no, that's why I teach SANS around the world. I accept those around the world events because I think it makes our world a safer place, the societies and so forth. It's also and that's probably something that I didn't bring up earlier about myself, is that I do provide some of my time to the ICS Village, helping them at different events, going out and volunteering my time for that, helping with the website, but also planning different events. For those of you that aren't aware, there's a big push right now between ICS Village, SANS, Siemens, a lot of different educational universities, and DoD and the Department of Energy in the United States for internships. Siemens has an internship that I provided. I just updated the ICS Village website with a link to that. There's going to be a lot of other opportunities that are coming forward for people that are getting into this industry, whether they are new to IT at all, or they're they just want to know about and learn about OT environments and helping to improve that these sectors. All of those opportunities are there. So I would look at the links we have for Siemens, for ICS Village, for SANS, for Department of Energy, Idaho National Labs. Look at all of those areas because there's so many opportunities to learn about and get better at these fields and then start working in them. So I highly recommend that. Can't speak more highly of ICS Village, not because I'm involved, but because that team does such a good job getting the word out.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, I'm wearing my ICS Village shirt today, repping it. But same thing. Like I do that because obviously I enjoy it. It's fun. I love speaking. I love teaching and giving knowledge out that I have. I have all these experiences. I want to lift others up so that they have the ability and options. Again, because it makes our world safer. So ICS Village is a great organization. It's a nonprofit. Like all that. So there's a lot of opportunity for folks. This is a great industry to be in, and it's only going to get more. Like there's job security for a long time in this field.
Yeah, I know, absolutely. And so many people, they look to SANS training, they see how expensive it is, and I understand it is expensive, but I have no control over that. But the reason why I'm involved with it is that whole SANS ICS team. Tim Conway has brought together an awesome set of people, both from an instructor standpoint, but also from a development standpoint, people that maintain things. They go out, all of our team members go out to different locations to educate people, whether it's, there's a bunch of different programs that are going on behind the scenes that aren't as public, where we're helping a lot of organizations and countries improve and make sure that their societies are safer. That's why I'm involved with the SANS ICS team. In my mind, they're playing an important role across all of our societies. So.
100%. I'll make sure to put all those links, guys, in the show notes so you can click on some of those, see some of those internships, the SANS courses that Don's in, as well as the others. It's a good opportunity, and there's a lot of resources out there. There's some free resources. There's paid resources. There's internships. You're the limitation. If you're not learning, then that's on you, because there's plenty of places out there to learn. So
absolutely, I have a list of resources. So anybody, I'll put my contact information. I mean, obviously we'll put it in there. You hit me on LinkedIn. I'm mentoring all the time. I sit down, especially with veterans. I make sure that I make time. I'll sit down and plan out an hour, and we'll just sit down and figure out their goals and get them moving in the right direction. And it seems to have worked out pretty well for a couple of individuals. I mean, they're all self-motivated anyways, but just at least pointing them in the right direction for, like, as you mentioned, those free resources for self-education. So all you got to do is ping me on LinkedIn. If we've got time to sync up, I'm more than happy to do it. Or I can just shoot over those that list that I have via email.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Don. I appreciate your time. It's a great conversation, and again, happy early Marine Corps Day.
Thank you very much, sir. You have a great weekend.
All right, you too.
Thanks for listening to the Protect OT Cybersecurity Podcast. If you got some valuable information from today's show, please subscribe, rate, and review the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. To learn more about Aaron and to get your free copy of the OT Cybersecurity Solution Buyer's Guide, go to industrialdefender.com. That's industrialdefender.com, or you can click the link in the show notes.